What's up, guys? Thanks so much for stopping by the channel again. Today we have another in our series of faction reviews for Hail Caesar. This is the Spanish list, although it really should be called like Ancient Spanish, just to be clear, right? So this is Spain, or those people living in Spain, roughly 3rd through 1st centuries BC. So again, covering roughly the time period of Punic Wars, the Numantine War, Lusitania, Cantabrian War. We'll get it right. So some interesting things going on there, and kind of an intersection between Rome and Carthage in many ways too. So an interesting list as well, not overly lengthy either. So kind of like some of the more recent reviews we've been doing, but yet another infantry focused list here with 75% or more being the requirement. Again, not counting skirmishers, but so that's big blocks and blocks of infantry there. Of that, Scutari have to be at least 25%. Again, non-skirmishers. And then basically the remainder, your other type of unit, could be cavalry up to a quarter of your list. So again, you certainly could do all infantry or just even like a smidgen of cavalry, or if you want a little bit more balanced, that 75-25 split there is viable. So that being said, let's jump in and see what this list has to offer us. Again, it's not a very large list, as we mentioned. So you have the Scutari medium infantry armed with throwing spears as our first choice there. Typical infantry, medium infantry stat line, and just solid with no sort of frills there. At 23 points a pop. We can do a couple different upgrades to that. So we could give them javelins counting as pila, in addition to their spears, which adds 3 points there. So, and again, brings you gives you access to the pila rules there. And then we can do, for one unit of those, we could basically upgrade them to the General's Guard unit, which would have to be in the General's Division. And so, that could be the bog standard Scutari unit that we upgrade, or really you might as well go all in there and make sure that it also has the Pila, just to get the best of everything there. But that's another 4 points there, which brings you up into basically heavy infantry fighting power, albeit still with the medium infantry morale save. So keep that in mind. So it's a little bit more of a glass cannon in that sense, but that does give you fanatic and tough fighters together, which is not a typical pairing that we've seen. So, but interesting nonetheless, and well worth taking just because it's again, pretty damn solid unit there. So beyond that, and again, remember that the Scutari basically has to be at least 25%. Could be all of your infantry if you wanted to go that route. But we do have Catrati, light infantry with javelins as small units. Again, our typical sort of small harassing supporting unit there with a typical stat line. We also get Celtiberian medium infantry war bands in here as well, which is pretty neat, armed with swords and javelins. Again, that rather typical warband stat line of Clash of 8 will drop down to a 6, and actual medium infantry type morale save there, and those guys give you access to wild fighters in quantity. So you could field a ton of these guys, or these warbands here, in addition to the more I would say trained or elite or more organized, let's put it that way, Scutari. Then we dip into the skirmishers. Now, the interesting thing here, one more thing with the Celtiberian warbands, some of the recent lists have let us upgrade those types of warbands into large units. That's not present here, so just keep that in mind. But nonetheless, you get that in quantity, all for 27 points a pop there. Moving into the skirmishers, we get our typical choices here, although not as extensive as some of the other lists out there. But skirmishers, small javelin skirmisher units, so we have that at 11 points. Then we could switch that over to slings in the small units just to get some actual long-range firepower, and that is literally the only long-range option in the whole list. So for basically 12 points there, so 1 extra point on top of the standard. And then without restriction, which is the interesting thing here, we could make our skirmishers marksmen for another point. So for 13 points, even though we don't have a huge variety of long-range options here in the list, nonetheless we get access to basically all of our slingers could be marksmen, which is actually pretty cool. And again, small units, so we could have lots and lots of these little annoying units for people to encounter and deal with. So I'm just, again, accumulate a couple of bits of damage there before the close combat happens. So one more light infantry here, and that's the Catrati light infantry fielded as small units. And oops, actually, sorry, we skipped one there. Apologies. So we have a medium cavalry armed unit with spears and javelins. Again, pretty solid medium cavalry, not too many frills there. Again, does drop off to 5 on the sustained, but these guys are tough fighters, and so that's the main cavalry unit. We do get a light cavalry one below, but having basically your standard cavalry be tough fighters is actually pretty cool, all for 28 points a pop there. And then along with that, a Ktradi light infantry fielded as small units, basically 1 per medium cavalry. And they essentially form a subunit of cavalry. So if you remember back to some of those early like Bronze Age lists that had like chariot runner units, this is kind of a similar concept here. So, but those bring you another 12 points there for those units, and just a little bit of, again, support for those cavalry. Lastly, light cavalry with javelins as small units. Again, just mobile, fast, small harassing units that can do a little bit of work in combat on that first turn, but nothing extra there because they get pretty horrendous pretty quickly if the fight drags on, which it probably won't for too long. Interesting here, though, that whereas a lot of the recent lists have had access to feign flight, that is not present in any way, shape, or form here. No upgrades or whatever. So a fairly generic light cavalry unit, and again, overly fragile in that sense that we don't have access to feign flight or any other tricks there. So interesting list overall, and then of course the general here, just generals and commanders, leadership 8. So nothing horrible to deal with as far as like leadership 7 goes. So you have that going for you, and certainly like leadership 9 wouldn't make sense as an upgrade here at all. So that's good that that's not there. So it's an interesting list, right? Again, infantry heavy, but we can field some solid infantry if, again, not all that many choices. But you got your pretty solid overall Scutari medium infantry. They do what they do for, you pay for what you get there. And again, they're not overly special, but just solid and dependable as far as medium infantry goes. Certainly, again, take that, just spend the points and take that General's Guard unit fully upgraded, also with the heavy Pila, just to have a sort of elite-like unit in your General's division. Depending on how you want to sprinkle in the light infantry and skirmishers with the javelins there, obviously the light infantry can ostensibly do a little bit more work, but they're overall still fairly similar to the skirmishers with javelins, a small unit. So it's ultimately just a slight point of difference in combat capability. But again, if they're already in combat, it's probably not going to go too well for those little units there. That being said, war bands is also where it's at. So find a good balance between the Scutari and the war bands, and I think that will do you well there, just because people will maybe not expect too much out of this list if they've never faced it, but the war bands will certainly provide you with the punch. And then you just kind of got to follow that up with sort of that solid Scutari, not quite core of the infantry, but again, you do certainly have to take at least some of them. So a good mix probably would be, something like 40% or so, maybe 50% of the infantry as some of the war bands, bring in the Scutari, roughly those numbers, and then just sprinkle things in as far as skirmishers, although on the Scutari part, it doesn't care about the skirmishers. Actually, the infantry doesn't either, so we'll revise that here real quick. So yeah, bring as much of that as you can. Obviously, the skirmishers fit in where they do. The Ktradi light infantry, small unit, might not even be worth it, but obviously you can invest in the skirmishers as you need to accomplish that. Speaking of the skirmishers, again, having access to essentially as many small marksman slinger units as you can legally take based on the list requirements is pretty dang cool for all of 13 points. So that's certainly worth looking at, and again, does provide you with your only long-ranged option in the whole list. So just keep that in mind. Medium cavalry is also fairly solid. So again, don't forget, up to a quarter of the army can be cavalry, and they do have that sort of funky subunit, almost like the chariot runner units of Bronze Age lists that we looked at. So So definitely worth looking at, because again, your standard cavalry unit here is just tough fighters, and that's pretty cool. Even if they don't really have anything else overly special going for them, they're still just a very solid, dependable medium cavalry unit that you can use to sort of help deal damage, give you that mobility, and help maybe even distract a little bit from your infantry as it's approaching. So certainly other infantry lists out there and types of units will outfight some of your things 1-to-1, but you do have some interesting basic synergies here as well. The smaller light cavalry unit, again, might be worth taking a few of those, but again, no feigned flight there is a little bit rough, but they can still be serviceable, and they do fill that role of being on the flanks and chasing down other similarly small, weak units, or going after other maybe just vulnerable or exposed areas. So, and again, all with leadership 8 makes it a fairly solid list and fairly serviceable to command and maybe get things done there. So yeah, overall just a fun one, and model wise you can sort of combine various kits as well. I don't believe that there's necessarily anybody making ancient Spanish specifically, but between Roman, Carthaginian, and other awesome plastics that are out there, or metals, or however you're going to go about building your models up here, there's certainly a lot of great choices, and certainly would look good to research that and paint up something nice on the paint and hobby side there. So that being said, guys, hope you enjoyed our little review here of the Ancient Spanish. Let us know in the comments, have you run this list? Have you come up against it? What's your experience been either way? Let us know in the comments. Anything you would like to maybe see added to this or changed? Yeah, just hit us up in the comments. Thanks so much again for stopping by, guys. We will be continuing on, of course. So hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much again, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.